Welcome to another tutorial, and this week I'm going to show you how to create a logo animation in After Effects. So here is what we are going to be creating, a simple, in this case it's a badge logo animation, but I'm going to give you an idea of how to break down an AI, an Adobe Illustrator file, and bring that into After Effects and then go about animating it in and animating it out. So let's jump right into it. So let's get into After Effects, and I'm going to show you what you have to do to create yourself a logo animation. So I'm actually going to just start by showing you what I did in Illustrator to prepare the file for After Effects. I downloaded this template actually of a logo just so that I didn't have to take the time to create my own logo, but I came up with a company called Morning Grind, like a coffee brand, and I figured, you know, like the sunrise, waking up, all that would work really well. I made beans as little accents on the outside. So I just took a template in order to show you what you're supposed to do. So what you have to do, first of all, is you need to put all of your layers that you want to animate on their own separate layer in Illustrator. That can be a little time consuming, that you have to make a bunch of layers and click and drag and remove layers to be in their own spots. But as you can see, I already did that. So like I can animate these trees on their own real easily. I put the beans on their own layers, so they're a little easier to animate. And then made text its own layer. Everything got put on its own layer, so it's going to be that much easier to animate when it comes into doing it in After Effects. So I'm just going to save this just in case I messed anything up. And we're going to go back to After Effects. Okay, so now we are going to jump into After Effects and import our Illustrator file. So on a PC, you're going to hit Control-I. On a Mac, you'll hit Command-I. And you're going to select your logo Illustrator file and go down to here where it says Import As, and make sure that selection is Composition Retain Layer Sizes. That way the composition is going to import as well as all of the individual files. That is important because now we don't have to cut anything out. It's just going to be taking those layers and animating them. So make sure you select Composition Retain Layer Sizes, import that, and now you can see it comes in as its own composition with all of your layered files here. You can name them in Illustrator and they will translate over. I just didn't do that because I guess I'm just being lazy and I shouldn't do that, but I did. And you can see in your composition panel, I'm going to move me a little bit. In your composition panel, you can see that all of your layers are here. So when you click on them up here in the, it's a little like project preview up here, you can see those individual layers have came through. Now that everything is in After Effects, you're ready to start layering your composition so that you can start animating all of your logos. So I'm going to start by creating a new comp. As you can see, I click down here where this is the new comp, and I'm going to name this Logo Animation. I'm actually going to call it the Morning Grind Logo Animation because I'm specific. I'm going to do a regular 1920 by 1080. Let's animate it at 223.976. So actually what I want to do is I want to copy all the layers from the layered logo animation composition and just put that directly into my Morning Grind logo animation comp. And I'm actually just going to move it over and center it. And if you want to pull this grid up, which is actually really helpful for designing in After Effects, that's Alt''. That's the same command in both PC and Mac. So that's centered. Now I kind of want to get my composition panel a little bit larger, and to do that I'm going to hit Shift ? And that'll fit it to your composition window's panel size. So now we have our layers in the timeline. Everything's layered exactly how we want it, so we don't want to move the layers around too much, but now we got to figure out the style that we want to go with. So for me, I just want to kind of have everything pop up and scale up. I don't want to go too crazy into 3D space and have things rotating. I think this logo itself lends to 2D space, so that's what we're going to work in. Actually, I think the most important thing that we can do is maybe just skip ahead a little bit, and if we're going to move anything around or if we're going to scale anything up, it's probably smart to just set those keyframes where they are, so that no matter what, at this 3-second mark where these keyframes are, everything is where it's supposed to be. And the way that I did that is I hit S after selecting all of them, and that brings up your scale keyframes. And to make a keyframe, I just click this stopwatch, and the same thing, I just hit P for position and click this stopwatch to create these keyframes. So now if I even go back to 2 seconds and I just scale everything down to 0, be really bad animation, but it still animates up, which that's not what we want to do. We want to get this whole frame to, I think, be on its own. Like, we want all the borders and the colors here to be connected. So let's start by show you how to parent and pick whip layers together. So we're going to start with the that. I want to start with this guy. So this guy is our background and border, but we want to parent both the text and that sheen to the background. So right here is our text layer, morning grind, which I'm gonna write it out here, so I know that's the morning grind. And then this is the title container. So we'll title that title container. So we're going to parent the title container to morning grind, and then I'm actually going to go back here and delete these keyframes since it's now parented and I don't want it to do its own thing. I'm going to solo these so you can see now whatever the title container does, morning grind will do the same. So we want to find that sheen that's also there, and we're going to get that parented to it as well, which it is right here. So we're going to parent the sheen winning to the title container, and now that will also do the exact same thing, and it will be moving, in the right area for what we're doing. So now I want to mess with the trees. So as soon as the animation completes, I want these trees to pop up on their own timing. So I'm actually going to delete those keyframes. I'm going to put a position keyframe down for them. I don't want to have the scale there, so we're actually going to just hit P and then animate those. And then I'm going to go back about 12 frames, and to do that on PC, you use your page up, page down to move forward or backward in time. And on a Mac, it is function and then your arrow up and down. So I'm actually going to go back 12, and I'm going to move the trees down quite a bit, and then I'm going to stagger that animation. I'm just going to haphazardly move the keyframes just a little bit so they come up differently. And then I'm also going to select them, go to the line graph editor, and give them a little bit of an ease in, which is the bottom one here, so they come up a little bit smoother whenever the animation is complete. So at the moment, this is what I have, and it's not good. That is not good. So let's get this background to be all parented together. So we're going to take so we know that these are done, so we don't have to look at these. These are the trees. So these are all accounted for. I'm actually going to start using this thing to hide layers so I don't have to see them and I can't affect them. So you can turn these little Shy Guy guys on so that when you click this button, they'll hide. And I'm going to do the same thing with this since I'm done with these. And now it gives me a little bit more a little easier and more tolerable for me to look at these layers and know what I'm doing. So let's start by parenting to this main container. So this is the large container that is the entire outline, and we'll actually animate this so that it's the only thing that we're animating and everything else can just stick to it. So we'll call this the outline container. Now, obviously, when you're doing this, you're going to have a different logo. You're going to have a different style that you're going to want to animate it maybe. But I'm just trying to give you an idea of how you break down a logo from Illustrator in After Effects to then give some life to your logo. So these are now all paired to the large container, and you can see here now when these are moving, you must delete their keyframes so that they don't do their independent thing. So make sure whenever you're parenting something to another layer, that layer should be the only one that has keyframes in it so that they can all move at the same time. As you can see, that background layer is now just moving at the same time. All right, so now we got our background layer handled. That's going to be the first thing that comes up for us. So I'm going to move that to the beginning of the timeline, and we'll have that animate up in about 12 frames. And we'll give it a easy a little ease of motion. We're also going to parent, this layer to the outline container, so that one also comes up with that. So now that we got the pretty much the base of the logo animating, and very simple, but we have the base of the logo animating up. Now I want to do a couple things that are gonna really give it the style. I am going to animate the sun up to a position as soon as it gets awake. So the sun's rising. Pull that back about 12 frames. I'm gonna just hide it behind that layer, and I'm gonna give it a simple ease in. And then I am also going to animate the rays. So I'm gonna grab the rays. I like where they're at. They don't need to animate up. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna press Y. This is to rotate something, and that pulls up your anchor point tool. And then you grab this, which is the anchor point. Oh, my camera just overheated a little bit, I think. We might just lose the camera for the rest of the tutorial, I think. We're gonna, right here is your anchor point, and I'm gonna actually pull that down to where the center of the sun would be. And then I'm gonna hit R for rotation, and I'm gonna move that ahead about 6 or so frames. We can mess with it just to see how fast it looks. But then we're gonna have this actually animate around, and I actually still don't like how that looks. So I'm gonna go back and pull that anchor point down even further because I really want it to look like it's animating around it. That's so much better. So we're gonna pull that to about there, and then we are going to give it an easy ease in. And I'm actually going to pull it so it has a little bit more of an easy ease in. So it's a little fast, but yeah, you know what? I'm actually going to pull it so it's almost a full second animation. I'm going to go even further with that. Yeah, that's what we want. So now you can see that it's popping up right here. So you can see it in the bottom. So in order for that to be hidden, we need to let's start by highlighting rays. Control Shift C or Command Shift C to make it its own comp, and I'm just going to leave it as rays comp 1. I'm going to move all attributes, and what that means is it's going to take any keyframes or effects that you've applied to that layer and put it inside of this composition, so it's pre-comping it, and you're going to hit OK. So now it's its own comp. The first thing that I want to do is I want to parent it to the outline container, just so that no matter where it's at, it's still in the same. It's going to be attached to the logo. So now that I have it parented to that, I'm going to let it do its animation, and we need to hide this layer under so that we don't see it pop out. So we're going to get our mask tool, which is the rectangle tool, and hit Q. That's both on Mac and PC. And where it is, where I don't want to see it, I only want to see where it's appearing. And since it's actually already hiding behind this layer, the morning ground layer, I can make a mask that just shows just right here. We don't have to feather it or anything because it's just revealing from behind that layer. So we're going to leave that as it is. So now it looks like it animates up from behind. And it actually looks pretty good. So now we're going to kind of work through the trees are the same concept. And since we actually already have them animated, we can go ahead and do the exact same thing that I just did for these. And that is select all of them, make a pre-comp, call it the trees. And then make sure it's parented to the container, just in the case that I end up moving it later, and just put that mask around it. And then they come up from behind as well. So now we're going to animate the beans. Make sure the beans come up and they're not just scaling up all willy-nilly right there. I think I'm going to... I actually kind of want to make them a little bit thicker. So these are my beans. So beans and beans 2. So we're actually going to remove their animations. We're going to parent it to outline container so that if I move it, it's still connected to something. So I think first of all, I need to make them, the stroke didn't translate as well as I wanted it to, so I'm going to make them a little bit thicker. So I'm adding a stroke layer style, and they're the same color as this, so now they just are going to be a little more full. I'm actually going to make this 1.5. Yeah, 1.5 looks good. So I'm going to copy that layer style onto the other beans as well, just so it looks a little more full and intended of what it's supposed to be. So something that I didn't do is I didn't make each bean its own layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate these bean layers. So I'm going to hit Control D or Command D on Mac. And now I have 4 bean layers, but there's too many beans. So now with this bean, I'm going to just hit my my rectangle tool by hitting Q, and I'm going to just highlight this bean. And then on this layer, on the other bean layer, I'm going to do the exact same thing, but now I have that bean. So now we've split that layer into 2, and now I have 4 completely editable, completely able to be edited beans. So I'm going to move my anchor point tool onto these beans so that I can rotate, scale, or whatever so that it happens to just those beans. So I'm going to just be going through and using what we've already learned throughout the last couple minutes and breaking these layers up and preparing them for an animation. So what I'm gonna do for these ones is I'm gonna have them scale and rotate up. So I'm gonna just start with one bean. I'm gonna hit R and make a keyframe. I'm gonna hit S and make another keyframe for the scale. Now I'm gonna select both of those, and I'm gonna go back. Let's say we'll do 12 frames. And I'm going to scale it. I'm going to rotate it to the left. I'm going to rotate it about 180 degrees. Minus 180. And then scale it down to 0. And then I'm going to give that a easy ease in and give it a little bit more of a handle. So there we go. So like when I animate it, it animates up like that. And see how it's animating out from its left. I'm going to bring the other one and I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to have it rotate the inwards. So we're going to have that rotate counterclockwise. This one's rotating clockwise. But since this animation works, since it's moving from clockwise, since it's on the left side of the screen, I'm going to copy these keyframes. Go to the beginning of where those keyframes start, hit Control C. And then I'm going to select the bean on the bottom left, and I'm going to paste those animation frames on that one. So they both animate the exact same way since they're on that side of the screen. And now I need to do the same thing to these ones, except they need to rotate in from the other side. So I'm going to paste the exact same keyframes on those, but instead I'm going to change this to not minus 180, but plus 180, so 180. And now that one animates up from the correct side. So I'm going to copy these keyframes and paste that on the other bean because it is on the same side of the screen as that bean. But now I don't like that they all animate up at the same time, so I'm going to stagger the animations, and I'm actually going to animate them as if they're a clock. So I'm going to animate them in counterclockwise. So these start first, and then I'm just going to select all the keyframes of the beans and go forward about 3 frames, and then move the keyframes down, and I'm going to hold shift and drag over these keyframes, which will take it away from the entire selection. And then we can do the same thing. 3 frames, drag them over, select these, deselect these, 3 frames, drag these over, and there you go. Now they're all going to animate up kind of sequentially, which is nice. We got to animate the titles up. So we're going to start with Morning Grind. So as soon as the sun finishes and the rays start to sweep around the sun, we're going to animate Morning Grind up. So let's go down to the text layer that's Morning Grind. I called it Morning Layer. Which is, so at this point we want it to start animating. So how many frames do we want to go? Anything between 12 and 24 looks really good. So we're going to just count forward. We're We're going to do 18. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Hit this little keyframe button to make sure we have a point in time. Go back to your first keyframe and just pull that down so that it goes below the outline. And then we're actually going to make sure that this has a smooth animation in as well. So we're going to hit the easy ease in. So it has a pretty easy thing in. But I don't like how it's not coming to a stop more smoothly. So what I like to do is right click on your position layer or your position keyframe attribute, separate the dimensions. Now you have full control of the x-axis as well as the y-axis. Now that you did that, it actually lets you completely customize how it's going to ease in. When you pull this thing over, it shows that it eases it in and shows you how fast it'll get to that finished point. So now you can see, since I pulled that all the way over, it ramps in too fast. See that? So we're going to actually pull it back just a little bit, and now it'll come to a nice smooth stop, which works really well with the rays, come into that nice smooth stop. And we're going to do the exact same thing with the text layer below it. We're going to go and we're actually going to have that animate in just after the text layer above it. So we're going to pull these keyframes back, delete them, and we're going to hit position. And we're actually going to have it animate out from behind the morning grind text layer. So we're going to actually pull this down below that container, because this way we won't actually even have to do any animation. Set a keyframe there, pull it up in behind that layer, and we are going to do the same thing as we did with the other positioning for the other title and hit separate dimensions. Make sure you have the Y selected, go to your line graph editor, and we're just gonna pull it over so it has the exact same smoothness, but we don't want them animating at the exact same time. So we're just going to pull this over about 4 or 5 frames so that when it animates, they animate a little bit separately in time. Yeah. But now there's a problem. We see the morning grind when it starts right here. So an easy solution for that is the same thing we did in the past. We select that and we pre-comp it by hitting Control-Shift-C, make it its own layer, but you see that it bounced off on its own. There's a reason for that. We need to make sure nothing's parented to that. It's not parented to anything else. So we're actually going to put none. And so now that it's not parented to anything and nothing's parented to it, it's my dog, we can pre-comp it and see it stays there. Now we can attach it back to the container. So now its whole layer, as well as any masks that I create, are now parented to that title container, which is also parented to the bigger container where it animates. So now that we got that all straightened out, we can it's already pre-comp, so we're gonna actually hit Q, which is our rectangle tool, and we can make its mask right here. And since it's actually the same color as the border, it doesn't matter if we're actually exact in making it look like it's popping up from behind the border. But you can see now, whenever it animates up, it animates as if out of nowhere. Those trees are still animating, our beans are animating, and now I want to get those triangles to come in on their own. So we're going to duplicate that. We're going to do the same thing we did with the beans, where we isolate one, and then in the other layer, we're going to isolate the other. And since the animation is already there, if we just pull this one down the timeline just a little bit, they'll animate up separately, but we want to make them a little more smooth on their animation, so we're going to highlight those keyframes, go into your graph editor, highlight those last 2 keyframes, give them a little bit of a smoothness, and now they pop up a little smoother. So this is our animation so far, and you can see, look, so we're hiding these layers behind these layers once they're animated. A simple way to do that is to just go to those layers. Which ones? That's the sun and the rays, and I think that's it. And you can just hit Alt bracket, start bracket, and that way they won't even appear in the timeline until they're already covered by other items. So you can see now that we did that. The only thing left is coffee and tea, so we'll just do the same thing for that. Go to the coffee and tea layer, which is this one, and do the same thing. Select that, Alt in bracket, and now there's nothing here. As you can see, there's nothing there, and now your animations all come up smooth and on their own. All right, so now we're ready to export this, but it's not animating out. We need to animate the all the layers back out. An easy way to do that would be to just make sure you select all of your layers, hit Control-Shift-C, and this will pre-comp the entire logo. So logo animation, and what we can do to make this super simple is then open this logo animation folder up. This is all the layers that you've been working in. Go to Layer, New, Null Object, and then wherever you want to start animating out. So what actually you're going to want to do, since all these are parented to specific other layers that are making the motions, you just want to find the layer that is so the ones that don't have anything, they're not parented to anything, those you will want to pair to null 1, and then as well as these, null 1. But then layer 13 is where most of your contents are are parented to. So if you parent at least layer 13 to null 1, since it is the layer that has all of the animations being done to it, then when you animate your null, everything will follow with it, but it won't affect how it animates in. You see that? So we'll do the exact same thing that we were doing before. Go to your graph editor, separate the dimensions, and you're going to want to make sure you're focusing on the Y while it's leaving. And you're going to want to pull that down so that it has a smooth animation out. Let's see if we can get my camera back on, because I keep talking to the camera, but it's not on. Come on. Yay. So what you want to do, you can see everything's stuttery, and I do this to all the animations, and this is my process. Is I don't turn this on until the end, because it usually takes longer to render, and you can see the pre-renders. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to this first column, and you're going to want to select all of your layers and turn this little motion blur toggle switch on. So that way, whenever everything's animating, you can see there's a little more of a animation to it. But I actually don't like it on the beans, because since the beans are just these solid strokes, it actually doesn't end up looking good on them. So I'm gonna go to my bean layers. So maybe let's just see what it looks like if we take off those strokes, see if that actually makes them look a little bit better, and it kind of does. So for the sake of motion blur, I'm gonna make these beans just stay how they are. A little more. It's kind of just a small accent. I don't not like it. But that's sometimes what you got to do when you're animating. If you don't like something and it's not working, just try different things and see if it actually ends up working in your favor. That's a nice logo animation that now I'll show you how to export. So it animates out. And now it's done. So that's about 8 seconds. So we're going to go back to your main comp, which is morning grind. And I'm going to set an out by pressing N. And then I'm going to go up to composition, add to render queue. To make sure that it exports as a alpha, RGB and alpha, make sure you go to channels and hit RGB and alpha. On PC, it's an AVI. On Mac, you can do it's just the format is animation, and it will let you do the RGB and alpha. So I'm going to hit OK. Change the location of where it goes. Go into my animation for this project, go to exports and hit save. Let it render out. Won't take that long. It's a pretty quick animation. This is what your logo will look like when you put it over footage. So it'll animate up over my face. And then it will animate down and out, and then you see my pretty mug. But that's how you go from breaking down an Illustrator file to prepare it for animation in After Effects, importing it and animating it in After Effects. Of course, you're not going to be animating the exact same logo as me, but I hope that I was able to show you the kind of basic principles that I do when I'm breaking down a logo and animating it in After Effects. So if you learned anything from this video, be sure to give it a like down below. Don't forget, if you really want to see more content from me, subscribe. And if you like this video, you'll probably like other videos of mine, so those will be right here for you. See you guys next time.